Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the 9th South Forum on Sustainability. The theme is the collapse of modern civilization and the future of humanity. My name is Seung. I'm the moderator for today's section. I'm a research officer with the Center for Cultural Research and Development Center. And I also take classes with students on campus farming at Lingnan University. I'm also a founding member of the Global University for Sustainability, and I am a certified Tai Chi coach. Today we have the speaker, Dr. Chow Sze-Chung. The topic is Against the Grain, Vegetable Gardening in Hong Kong. We would like to thank today's interpreters, English to Spanish interpreters, Melissa Raffini and Paula Vasella, English to Chinese interpreters, Huang Xiaomei and Li Menghong. Speaker, Dr. Chow Sze-Chung, Sangwoodgoon, Hong Kong, China. Chow Sze-Chung is a farmer and co-founding member of Sangwoodgoon Organic Farm and Sangwood Kids Club in Hong Kong, which serve the local community by producing seasonal vegetables, 2 crops of rice annually, and facilitating gardening activities, education for young kids. He received his Ph.D. in Cultural Studies from Lingnan University. His research interests include the history of food and agriculture, regenerating agriculture, etc. He recently published a book about market gardening in Hong Kong. Dr. Chow's book is titled Light of Dusk, who says that there is no veggie farming in Hong Kong. 夕阳的光，谁说香港没有菜园? He runs the organic farm and kids club with his team members in Park Hung-Yuen. He was actively involved in social movements in the early years, such as defending Chow Sze-Chung village from the evacuation by the Express Rail project. He combines the key skills of agriculture art, political science, cultural studies, and film criticism, and has traveled in academic and cultural circles and cultivated vegetable gardens for more than 10 years. However, if one thinks that this book is about the author himself, or that he is looking back and summarizing his experience of participating in the agricultural movement in Hong Kong for more than a decade, then the reader may be disappointed. This book is not about anyone's personal story, but about the farmers of Hong Kong's vegetable gardens, return to a large community network and historical timeline to present their stories in 3 dimensions. The reader can interpret it as a combination of the author's field research and his doctoral dissertation research, introducing to the general reader the evolution of Hong Kong's agriculture, especially vegetable farming, and the stories of farmers' struggle over the years. He has already explained in a simple and easy to understand way the business status of vegetable farming and the changes in Hong Kong agriculture. Now, we would like to listen to Dr. Chow. The floor is yours.
It is really my honor to be invited to speak in this the 9th South Forum on Sustainability, and I'm going to talk about the vegetable gardening in Hong Kong, and I will basically divide my presentation into 2 parts, and part 1 will be more of a general description of the evolution of the market gardening sector in Hong Kong. And the second part will be more about our own experience of running an organic farm and also recently an educational farm in Hong Kong. So let me waste no time and begin. Okay, let me share screen first. First of all, I would like to say that as Lingnan has already excellently introduced my book, and actually part of my presentation today will be based on my recently published book. Because it is in Chinese, so it doesn't actually have an official English translation. On the name doesn't have as an English translation. But literally, the book title is called "The Light of Dusk," which means the kind of light when the sun is setting. This book basically is based on a research covering the current situation of the market gardening industry and the vegetable supply chain. And in this research, I, together with some of our, together with a research team, we interview more than 60 market gardeners and also dozens of practitioners in the wholesale, logistics, catering, and retail sector of the vegetable supply chain. So it is basically an organization of the data collected from this large data pool from the interview work. And apart from the data from the interview, I also integrate some of the historical analysis of the evolution of the market gardening, which is basically taken from my PhD research, which is more or less about the same topic, but there are difference in the focus on this book and also the focus of my PhD research. So there are two things, they're not completely different, but they have same research interests. So let me begin. First of all, I'd like to say that market gardening as a sector in Hong Kong, it only took root in Hong Kong after the Second World War in the 20th century, which means it only started from late 1940s to early 1950s. It may sounds a little bit strange because definitely it may sound a bit strange because there were definitely people growing vegetables in Hong Kong before the Second World War. But what I meant by this taking root of the market gardening after the Second World War is that it was organized and disciplined as a sector by the colonial British government at that time. And let me give you some brief idea about the farming practice in Hong Kong before and after the Second World War. Before the Second World War, which means starting from maybe 300 or 400 years ago up until around 1940s, people in Hong Kong, they grow something, and in our largest farming area in Hong Kong, which is the New Territories, people in the New Territories, they grow paddy rice, and they were what we call the indigenous people now, and those indigenous people, they cultivate paddy rice since they moved to Hong Kong 300 or 400 years ago up until 1940s, about 1940s and 1950s, and vegetables as the things that people grow, it became an occupation taken up by the people fleeing from mainland China after the Second World War and around late 1940s and early 50s. And because at that time, with the establishment of the People's Republic of China, quite a large number of people, what I'm saying is about maybe 2 or 3 millions of people, they moved from mainland China to Hong Kong, and some of them took up the occupation as a farmer in Hong Kong, and when they moved to Hong Kong, and when they began to grow things in Hong Kong, they decided not to grow rice, but they decided to grow vegetables from Hong Kong. So basically, the establishment or the beginning of vegetable market gardening in Hong Kong was the people who began this market gardening sector are those people who flee from mainland China after the Second World War, and they were basically migrant people. So as I said, people grow vegetables before the so-called beginning of the market gardening sectors, but the variety that the people grew before this era of market gardening sectors were vegetables such as radish, Chinese mustard, and cabbage, etc., etc. And the commonality of the variety that they chose is based on one feature, or based on several features. The variety should be or must be sturdy enough, and they have and people will should possess their local recipes for processing and preserving those type of vegetables, like radish. People will sun dry the radish, and like the Chinese mustard, they will ferment the Chinese mustard in brine, or which is salt water. And people chose those varieties, and also they process and preserve the vegetable because vegetables were not considered as a commodity. I mean, what one may say, to be freely circulated in places called market. People grew vegetables because they have to consume it. So for households in the New Territory, everyone grew a small amount of vegetables for self-consumption. So they are not growing in large amount. They didn't grow the vegetable primarily for sale. They grew the vegetable for self-consumption, so they will grow a vegetable that could be easily processed into a form that they can store for a longer time. So the variety that people grew before the era of market gardening were more restricted to variety that can be easily processed and preserved. And on the other hand, after the era of market gardening in Hong Kong, the variety that market gardeners grew immediately expand and became more diverse. And the variety that people chose will include different kinds of green leaf vegetables, such as the famous Chow Sze-Chung, which Hong Kong, which is very popular in Hong Kong, and pak choy, spinach, watercress, amaranth, and spinach, water spinach, etc., etc. The commonality between all these variety is interestingly is the opposite of the choice made by the people long time ago. The variety that people chose to grow are mainly very perishable green leaf vegetable, meaning that they are not suitable for long storage or prolonged transportation. And the reason why the market gardener chose to grow this perishable variety of vegetable is that because it fits very well with the urban household lifestyle, because for people in Hong Kong, they prefer to shop every day in the wet market for fresh vegetable. They do not process food in their urban home setting, and then instead they will cook every day, and then when they cook every day, they would prefer fresh vegetable purchased every day from the fresh market. So market gardener, they fill up or they respond to the demand of the urban household, and then they choose to grow green leaf, perishable green leaf vegetables. Okay, and and if we refer to a wider social and political context at the time when the market gardening sector took roots in Hong Kong, we may relate that establishment or the beginning of the market gardening sector as more or less a response, or one may say even it is even part of the package of the rapid urbanization and industrialization in the Hong Kong urban area, which means the market gardening sector in Hong Kong, it didn't comes before the urbanization. It didn't comes before the industrialization. It came together with the urbanization and industrialization in Hong Kong after the Second World War. So they are pretty much they happen at the same time. They need each other, meaning that the market gardener needs the consumer in the urban area, and the urban inhabitant or the people living in the urban area, they need market gardener to provide fresh vegetables or other kinds of fresh food for the people in city, simply because the people in city, they work for a living. They work maybe in a factory or in an office, but they do not produce their own food. So they earn money, and they spend their money on food, and that's why the market gardener to them is inevitable. And one should also notice that this relationship was viewed by the British colonial government at that time as a very reasonable or a very appropriate relationship, because if there is no food production in Hong Kong, no matter if it's vegetables or chickens or pigs and etc., Hong Kong will need to rely on food import totally. And at the same time, or for a long time, Hong Kong rely on the food supply from China. But after the Second World War, the whole world entered into a Cold War setting, and in that Cold War setting, it was pretty important or strategic for the British government not to rely totally on the food supply from mainland China, because they belong basically to different camp. So the market gardening at that time, they evolved, or they began there are these political undercurrent of Cold War happening, and of course we won't say that there are political intention of the farmer to grow vegetables to defend the food self-sufficiency. I don't think the market garden at that time, every one of them, I'm not sure, or I don't think that everyone is very, everyone of them was very aware of this political situation. But what I am trying to say is that the colonial, British colonial government, they would allow, or they would encourage the development of the market gardening, because from a security point of view, it was beneficial for them to have their own food supply, or it would be more safe for them not to rely on food supply from mainland China totally. Okay, and this slide shows the land use in Hong Kong by different sectors of the by different agricultural sectors. Sorry, I didn't translate all of the graph, but what I would like you all to pay special attention is the light blue lines here. This line represent the acreage of farmland under paddy cultivation, which means the amount of land farmers in Hong Kong used to produce rice. So it drops from this graph, it drops from the early 60s, which this year is 1962, and it drops, and then for a few years it stayed more or less the same for a few numbers of years, and then it drops suddenly again in early 1970s. And basically in late 1970s, we can consider that paddy cultivation more or less disappear in Hong Kong. And the other one is I like you to pay attention is the green line here, the line in green color here. This line represents the acreage, or the total area of farmland under market gardening. We can see that the line increased gradually from early 60s, and then through the 60s it stays more or less same again. And then in early 70s, starting from early 70s, it increased, and then more or less stay the same until now. And what I like you to pay attention is that this green line, meaning the acreage under market gardening, it never really exceeds the acreage historically under paddy cultivation. I think this is an important point for us to take notice, because in Hong Kong there is common understanding that the establishment of market gardening effectively displaces the paddy cultivation. I won't say that it has no ground or it is totally wrong, but or we can say that from a time sequence point of view, market gardening came after paddy cultivation in the new territory. But if we look at the information or the statistic presented in this chart, we can see that even though the market gardening, the acreage of market gardening increased all the way from the early 60s to late 70s, the total area under market gardening did not really exceed the level or the acreage occupied by the paddy farmer. So, I think this is important. This point is important because when we talk about market gardening, it is rise and fall. We tend to use rise as its counterpart or its opposition. But what I'm trying to say is that the limiting factor for market gardening in Hong Kong was not rise, and I mean the more important context for the later stage of development of market gardening, we have to look somewhere else. And the problem is, and instead we have to focus on urban development and new town project that basically began since the 1970s in Hong Kong. These urban development and new town project, they substantially ate up agricultural lands, especially since 1970s. And to round up what I have just said, I like to stress one point. The market gardening sector as a sector and its development in Hong Kong, I would say that it was quite ambivalent, or it has an ambivalent characteristics, because as I said before, urbanization and the development of market gardening was indeed like twin brothers. Like twin brothers, they belong to each other. They need each other, but at the same time, the urban development and also the urbanization and industrialization was more like an uncontrollable force. Its expansion and its development was indeed a threat to the ongoing and continuous development of the development of market gardening. So the interesting characteristics of the market gardening in Hong Kong lies essentially here. It needs the urban area, but the urban area would at some point in time they eat up the land used by market gardening. So I think I would be very interested to know the situation in other district or country, but at least in Hong Kong, this understanding would be quite different from our common understanding of the development of Hong Kong, because the common understanding of the development of Hong Kong would sketch a very simple or simplistic picture, saying that Hong Kong developed from a fishing village, or in our case, in a farming village, and then it becomes an industrial city, and then it becomes a service sector city, including finance service, and banking service, insurance service, etc., etc. But if we look from another angle, or if we dig deeper into the data available, we would found that the development of Hong Kong was not linear like this. The development of Hong Kong was not like one stage replaced another, and then another stage replaced another stage, etc., etc. So this is what I try to bring up through this point. Okay. Another. So what happened to the market gardening after 1980s? 1980s was an I think 1980s was an important era for the market gardening in Hong Kong, because there are several characteristics to the market gardening in 1980s. In terms of production tonnage and sales values, market gardening peaked in early 1980s. It means that Hong Kong market gardeners produce the largest amount of vegetables and sales and the sales reached the highest level in early 1980s. But then when we say that it peaks at early 1980s, it also means that it drops gradually after the early 1980s. And what happened at that time was that some of the market gardeners, or regionally producing vegetables in Hong Kong, they were attracted to mainland China. And what happened in mainland China at that time was the famous open door policy. At that time, when market gardener go to mainland China, which indeed was not very far away from Hong Kong, they start market garden in mainland China, but not mainland China like 2,000 kilometers away. It was just across the river, which is the bordering line, which is the line bordering Hong Kong and mainland China. People, market gardeners just go across or go to the other side of the Shenzhen River, and then go to the place was called Shenzhen, and then they open market garden in Hong Kong, in Shenzhen. In mainland China, because at that time in the early 1980s, the land, both the labor cost and the land rent was still pretty low in China. And because at that time in the open door policy of mainland China, and a lot of special tax and custom arrangement were offered to the people starting market garden in mainland China, and all these incentive attracts a lot of Hong Kong local market gardeners, and also merchants, different merchants, to start the market gardens in mainland China. And the difference between their market gardens in Hong Kong and those in mainland China was simply the scale. The market garden was a lot bigger and employing more farm worker, and then they produce much more vegetables. And the vegetables produced by those market gardens in Shenzhen or mainland China, they had to be sold in Hong Kong according to the contract between the market gardeners and also the Chinese government, because those market garden was meant to be producing export type of vegetables. They're not going to produce vegetable in mainland China and sell in mainland China. It was and all this arrangement was were basically a strategy of the Chinese government at that time to attract foreign capital and resources of all different sorts, such as I mean the types of resources will include seeds, includes fertilizers, different types of machines, tools like spade and shovel, and etc. And even packing material like the rubber band the farmer used to bundle vegetables together. All these resources were imported to mainland China by market gardener. And so basically, to attract market gardeners to start a market garden in Shenzhen was a strategy to attract foreign capital. And then and this was a very, very important starting point for the later development, because once market gardeners in Hong Kong began to open market garden in Shenzhen, and for the next 30 years up until now, up until the current moment, currently, this type of market gardener, they in the very beginning, their market garden was in Shenzhen, and then later, when Shenzhen has another direction for their city development, they moved to another place in mainland China, such as Guangzhou, which is maybe a few hundred kilometers away, and then and a few years later, they moved to Guangzhou, to even more northern part of mainland China, like Henan, Hebei, or later they moved to Yunnan, or at around late 1990s, they moved from they move again to Beijing, and then since the new millennium, around 2008 or 2009, they move even further away to start. Many of those market gardeners, they began to start their market garden in a place called Ningxia, which is like 2,000 kilometers away from Hong Kong. And then and since that time, they still keep looking for more and better location for producing vegetables for re-exporting to China, to Hong Kong, and some other city in the southern China. And as a result, for people, or for the market gardeners who still grow in the Hong Kong soil, who still grow in the soil soil of the new territory, it would be very difficult for them to face competition from these vegetable exported, imported from mainland China. And then a very large number of the market gardener in Hong Kong, they decide to maybe decide to retire, or they were driven out of business. So it all happened in the started from 1980s. Therefore, 1980s was basically a very important decade for the development of Hong Kong market gardening. And for those people who may not be familiarized with, who may not be familiar with the situation in Hong Kong, currently, or maybe at least in this maybe 10 years, 8 years, the vegetable self-sufficiency of Hong Kong stands at around 2%. It means that there are very few market garden and market gardeners in Hong Kong, but there are still some of them who manage to survive until now and still keep producing fresh vegetables every day to Hong Kong people, even at this moment. And this 2%, if we compare with the statistically, if we compare to the time when the market gardening sector in Hong Kong was the strongest, the vegetable self-sufficiency, it could reach almost 50% in the 1960s. So in 1960s, Hong Kong was already a city of like 3 to 4 million population, 3 to 4 million people in terms of population. So I hope this figure gives you a brief idea of the rise and fall of the vegetable gardening in Hong Kong. So after some pretty grand description and analysis of the evolution and development of market gardening in Hong Kong, I'd like to talk a little bit about our own experience, the experience of Sangwoodgoon. Sangwoodgoon is the name of our group, and also it is also the name of our farm. We basically started 12 years ago in 2010, as Lai Xiang mentioned in her introduction. We began to learn farming because of the eviction of a farming village at that time. We began to learn farming because we in our intuition, we think that farming is a method or is a strategy to let people stay together for a longer time in one place, which is the field. That's why we began, we borrow farmland from the villages, and then we began to attend to different kinds of vegetables. We started in 2010, and then in the very beginning, the member of the Sangwoodgoon were all participants to the anti-express rail project. And in other words, we are not farmers. We were our identification were more to we identify ourselves more as activists instead of farmers. Farmers in the very beginning to us was like more or less like a strategy, or is an organizational tools, or an organizing strategy to help us to group more people together, so that there are people hanging out in the more people would be hanging out in the village, and so the strength for protecting the village would be stronger at that time. That was what we were thinking at that time. And but since we started to learn farming and then to become more serious in farming, farming really became the main focus, or growing vegetable become the main focus of our activities. And because as a market garden, on the one hand, we work hard on the field every day to produce vegetables. And if those vegetables, when they were ready to be picked and they have to go somewhere, and if our skills or if our capacity increase, we produce larger amount of vegetables, we'll need a larger outlet for us to for our produce to be circulated to somewhere else, and then we can start the field again and grow another batch of vegetable. That's why in the very beginning, when we became more serious about farming, we decided that we need to build deeper relationship or a stronger relationship with our consumer base, such that what we produce could go to our supporter or our consumer, and then we can start over again, and then sell again, and then we start over again and again and again. And that is how we think about the how to keep doing this on and on and on. So we began to absorb ideas like community supported agriculture and box system, etc., etc. And then we try to match our vegetables with specific groups of consumer in the urban area. And actually, we are still doing this now. So this is part of the work of Sangwoodgoon. And then because of our background as activists, and also because of our academic background, we will try to organize and execute different kinds of projects and programs related to culture and education. We will organize different farming workshops, and also we also host a small scale film festival regularly, and show films about we choose film based on certain topics or certain areas, and the topics and areas is food and agriculture. So we take films. They could be documentary films, and they could be feature films. It doesn't matter. That the only criteria is that they have to be around or about the issue or the topics of food and agriculture. And this picture shows our second farm. We now operate 2 farms. One is the very first farm that we produce vegetable. It has we work on that farm for 12 years already. And then the farm shown in this picture is another farm we rented like 4 years ago. We rented this farm because we made a decision at that time to sort of develop an educational branch of the original Sangwoodgoon, and we named the second farm as Kids Club, and actually the other person on the right hand side of this picture is our daughter at the time. She was still even younger at that time. At that since we rented that farm, we began to we started some division of production. In the very first farm we rented, we produced seasonal vegetables. And then in this second farm we rented 4 years ago, we designate it as an education farm and also a farm for growing paddy rice. We grow 2 crops of rice every year in that farm and host different kinds of educational programs or workshops for young children. And altogether, we are now a team of 6 people working on these 2 pieces of land. Let me talk about some of my thoughts or reflection after all these years as a roundup to my presentation and also as an invitation for discussion for our 2 discussants with us here today. Because our background was not from, my background is not from a farming family. Learning to produce vegetable is already quite hard, I must say. And I think it is even more difficult for a small farm like us to attain like big changes, like changes in policy or changes in like some major direction of the farming policy in Hong Kong. It is not easy, and what we are trying to do now, I think, is that on the one hand, we aim at we are trying to improve our production capacity. We are trying to try to polish or advance our farming skills, gardening skills, and we are together. We try to slowly to enlarge our CSA network and our CSA community. We think that this is important because CSA communities, the communities of CSA, in our experience, it is indeed pretty different from like we bring our vegetables to any farmer's market and meet customer randomly. The relationship is pretty different, and I mean there are we both I mean the farms and also the CSA member, we can both improve ourselves, and then we can create something out of this type of specific relationship. So I think we hope that we can continuously improve our skills and which enable us to slowly to enlarge our CSA network. And so this is what we are aiming at. This is one thing that we aim at the present moment. The second thing that we are putting more focus or emphasis is educational work, especially education for children at younger age. So, and in this picture, these are the junior high student, junior high school student. They visit our farms, and we have some farming experience together. And because I mean, it has something to do with our sensitivity, which I think to some people, sensitivity was something subjective, inborn, and etc. etc. But I would say what we prefer to eat or how we react to wildlife and ecology, etc., etc. They could be very intuitive, but I mean, it was still conditioned very heavily by our social setting, our educational setting, and etc., etc. Therefore, I think to let insects, to let photosynthetic mechanism, microorganism, etc., etc., to be part of the normal of children development again is very important. So, and this is what we are trying to see to what extent or to what in what aspect we can intervene in that aspect more. And I think it might represent our attempt for the global future. So thank you for your attention to my presentation, and I'm looking forward to the comments and questions from our two discussants. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chow Sze-Chung gives us a picture of a farmer how to survive under worst circumstances in Hong Kong, not only to manage a small farm for market gardening at Sangwoodgoon, but also do the experiential education at Kids Club. Now we introduce the first discussant, ANDO Takemasa. ANDO Takemasa, Musashi University, Japan. Takemasa's ANDO is a professor at the Faculty of Sociology, Musashi University. His research areas include the history of social movements in post-war Japan and food activism in Hong Kong. He has published Japan's New Left Movement's Legacies for Civil Society, translated in Chinese, 新左运动与公民社会，日本60年代的思想之路，左岸文化。He has visited Sangwoodgoon many times as a part of his field research. Now, ANDO, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Rachel. Can you hear?
Yes, I can hear.
Okay.
Very clear.
So let me share the PowerPoint. So maybe okay. Slide show. Okay. So let me start comment. Thank you, Chow, for your presentation. And I also get your book. It's quite interesting. So I try to give you a comment based on the presentation. So as Lei Xiang introduced me, I have worked on the history of social movement in Japan, and during the last decade, I also worked on social movement and farming in Hong Kong. So I have visited many times. I have visited the Chow Sze-Chung many times. And so based on my research on the Japan and Hong Kong, I give you comments. The first half of the paper is to examine the history of Hong Kong farming. So based on the large number of documents and interviews, I think Chow is successfully historicizing the veggie gardening in Hong Kong. And his paper gives us the detailed knowledge about Hong Kong farming. But I think the contribution of his work is not limited to Hong Kong local agricultural history. His paper also helps me to find a connection of Hong Kong farming with a wider political and social context. For example, he argued the rise of the garden farming after the Second World War actually came from UK's diplomatic policy to contain communist China. So what is interesting to me in his first part of his paper is Chow seeks to locate Hong Kong farming in the historical context of Cold War. So by doing this, he intervenes in recent discussions about the decline of Hong Kong farming. So I guess facing a difficult political situation, some Hong Kong people tend to idealize the colonial period, but Chow avoids it. Going into the details of the history, Chow tells us how to look at the mainstream discourse of the rise and fall in Hong Kong farming. He provides us with an understanding of the history in Hong Kong farming, differentiated from the mainstream discourses. So this is very interesting, very exciting to me. So based on the comments, I will give you three questions. First question is concerned with UK government support to farmers. So Chow argued that the British colonial government viewed local farming as a safety buffer against the total reliance of mainland Chinese food supply during the Cold War era. Can you talk more about the realities of the support? How much was the colonial government support to farmers substantial? I'm quite suspicious of the effect of the UK government support to farmers in Hong Kong. It reminds me of the case of Japan. In the post-war, after the Second World War period, Japanese government gave various support to local farmers because the conservative ruling party gained votes from the farmers in the national election. Comparing to the Japanese case, I think the colonial government in Hong Kong politically depended less on farmers. So I guess this would deteriorate the quality of support to farmers. So this is a historical questions about history in the UK colonial period. And the second question is concerned about the title of presentation. And the title is Against Grains. The title of this presentation is Against Grains. It comes from the political anthropologist James Scott's well-known book. In his book, Scott explores how the state formation was based on the dominance of grain production. So Scott argued the rise of the grain production led to the concentration of production, tax assessment, exploitation, cadastral surveys, and storage. So grains are best suited to the centralization of the society. Because Chow uses the title, I would like to ask Chow about how you see the history of the grain production and veggie gardening in the Hong Kong context. As Chow referred to it, paddy cultivation was practiced by the indigenous people before Second World War. This means that paddy cultivation was suited into the earlier formation of Hong Kong city-state. But how about the rise of the veggie gardening after Second World War? Did the shift of the rice production to veggie production liberate farmers from the centralized political structure? Looking at the paper, I guess that it does not seem to be true. So can you talk more about this topic? So this is the second question. How do you look at the against grains in the Hong Kong? Then the last question is concerned with Chow's experiences of the farming, and particularly the roles of the customers. Before the coronavirus infection spread, I visited Chow's farm many times and was inspired quite a lot by Chow and the farmers. And what I learned from them is farming is a way of changing a society. And I would like to call it a social farm or the social movement farm. That is a farm to solve the social issues such as sustainability. By producing, distributing, and consuming food with the people living in both cities and villages, farmers are engaged in the social change. So I can understand how what difficulties that Chow and the other farmers are facing. Chow claims that it is not easy for small farms to make Hong Kong veggie self-sufficient. The difficulties are not limited to Hong Kong farmers. I think the difficulties are common to farmers everywhere in the world, including Hong Kong and Japan and other areas. As a solution to the difficulties, Chow stated in the presentation that it is necessary to improve the production capacity and advancement of gardening skills to slowly enlarge your CSA network. So can you talk more about the roles of the customers in the CSA network? I would like to raise a case of the Japanese organic farmers. In the CSA network in Japan, customers or the consumers played a key role in supporting farmers. They sought to have a direct contact between the customers and the farmers. It is called partnership between customers and farmers. Customers gave a support to farmers by paying the fixed fee and consuming the several veggies rather than ordering their own favorites and visiting the farm to give an assistance to farmers. I don't like to idealize the Japanese case. The partnership did not work without housewives being engagement in the supporting activities. So this means a partnership relationship in the organic farming in Japan relied heavily on the division of labor by gender in Japanese society. So let me back to my last question. How do you look at the roles of the customers in the CSA network? And how do you seek to build relations of the farmers with the customers? So this is my questions, all the three questions. It's up to you, but whichever you pick up, but if you want to respond to the question, please feel free to do that. Thank you very much.
And then I would like to introduce the second discussant, Chen Shun-Xin. Chen Shun-Xin, the Partnership for Chen Shun-Hing, Partnership for Eco-Agriculture and the Conservation of Earth, retired associate professor from the Department of Cultural Studies, Lingnan University. After retirement, she has been engaging in organic farming and conservation movement and eco-community building in Nam Chung, a rural community located in northeastern corner of Hong Kong, for almost 10 years. This is one way to continue her local learning and practice on sustainable living in relation to ecology and cultural issues she worked on when she was engaged in the Peace Woman Project back in her teaching ways. Professor Chen, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, so hello, everybody. Thanks for inviting me to be the discussion of the House paper. Since I have known Chow for a long time and also known his work for also since they started Sangwoodgoon and back in 12 years ago. Yeah, and then we will also have a friendly relationship between Sangwoodgoon and then and our groups called abbreviated as PEACE, P-E-A-C-E, Partnership for Eco-Agriculture and the Conservation of Earth. So I just called it PEACE, okay? Yeah. And I think I will make use of this 15 minutes to respond to three points made by Chow in his presentations, and then have a few reflections on the issues that he has raised. Okay, yeah, and I also have PowerPoint to let you have an idea. So the first point I would like to respond to Chow's presentation is about the development, the historical development of paddy farming, changing to vegetable gardening in Hong Kong. I will use Nam Chung as a case to maybe add something into what happened in the 60s when he pointed out there's a sharp decrease in paddy rice production. Okay, yeah. So from this picture, you will see, I'll just let you put people who haven't been to Nam Chung have an idea where is it located and how does it look like. So as said in the introduction, so Nam Chung is located in the northeastern corner of Hong Kong. After this mountain is already Shenzhen, China. So this is actually a border, a village and an area and rural area at the border. Yeah, which migrants, immigrants can come. I mean, illegal immigrants usually came by this waterway back in the 50s and the 60s. Okay, yeah, and so this is Hong Kong already. This is and then this is Nam Chung Mountain. So you can see this is the Shuttlecock Sea here, and you can see that the whole area. This is mainly the main. Well, before you can imagine this is actually part of the sea. I mean, the coastline stretched from here all up to here. and then there's still another village here across here. So before it was all sea. And later, I think like 100 and something years ago, when the the background of the settlers here are Hakka people. They came like 300 to 400 years ago. And then they settled in different area. And before, most of them settled actually up here in the hill. So when there are more people, I mean, the families and the clans become bigger and bigger, and there are not enough agricultural land to cultivate. So they will move down to the coastline. Yeah, so you see that this YEUNG village, and this is a Jiang village, and then this is Law village where I live. Yeah, and then two more villages behind this Namchung River. Yeah, so you can see that when the villagers moved down to the coast 100 something years ago, they tried to fill in, I mean, turning this sea into farmland. Yeah, and then they grow paddy fields here. So I think in Chow spoke, there's a category back in the 60s. There are two kinds of paddy rice. One is the ordinary one. The other is called the ham shui dou, the salt water rice. So I think there is the rice grown in water, in land, which actually turned, I mean, from sea. Yeah, so they are still quite salty. So there are some kind of rice that can be grown in such kind of environment. Yeah. So you can see that the now you can see there are actually ponds here, right? Yeah. So actually this is another example of Hong Kong, what Chow has just explained, the dropping of the agricultural land on paddy farming, and then the increase of garden farming, vegetable farming in Hong Kong back in the 60s. And Chow has outlined three factors. The influx of the immigrants from mainland China, yeah, and also the second is the response to the needs of urbanization in Hong Kong, and also the third factor was about the colonial rule as a kind of strategy in the Cold War era. Here, actually, I would like to add into another point, which is very much related to urbanization, but it's quite specific to Hong Kong. I mean, and which Nam Chung gave a very good example. Yeah, you can see that back in that time, the paddy fields, in fact, were disappearing at that time. And because of two reasons. Yeah, so it's not so much because there were immigrants from mainland China trying to settle here and then started to grow vegetables here and replacing paddy fields, not like this. Yeah, there are two kinds of actually drainage happened in that decade, which actually I would term it as another kind of harm of urbanization. The first drainage is the drainage of human resources, human power. Yeah, because back in the 60s, actually late 50s and then early 60s, the colonial government actually was encouraging villages from Hong Kong, villages in Hong Kong in the new territories to migrate to England or some other places to work as cheap labor. So because life at that time in the villages were not very good, so the income was not high, and then they actually worked very hard. So most villagers were attracted to go to work as a laborer in very more urbanized and developed Europe. Yeah, mostly England, and some went to Holland. Yeah, and so I just now I was thinking about why the British at that time they want more people to grow vegetables here, to as a kind of strategic a kind of strategy in the Cold War, as Zhao analyzed it. But why British was not really care about the decrease of growing crops, I mean paddies, yeah, which is quite, I mean, the basis of human, I mean, basis for our food in the Chinese culture, which is very, very important. Yeah, so why the British government was a bit, did not care about the drainage of people at that time, because definitely they know that this is a kind of brain drain, yeah, in certain sense. And so, well, I haven't really done any research on what happened in the 60s in England, why they need so much labor from Hong Kong to work in restaurants and or in other working sites. Yeah, but I think it's also have something to do with urbanization in England. Yeah, and so maybe at that time that they need more cheap labor actually from Hong Kong to work and well serve there. So that's why they encourage people to do that. Yeah, and secondly, another kind of drainage actually is the water resources drainage, and it's also related to urbanization in Hong Kong. Yeah, and if those who have come to Nam Chung before, this is the main road going inside, and then this road all the way down to a dam, and this is a dam built in the 60s, I think around 1968, when because behind this this mountain. Well, so you can see if you can imagine the mountain on this side. Actually, behind the mountain here is the typo. When the Plover Cove was built back in the 60s, they tried to divert water resources from here to Taipo by building a long pipe tunnel. Diverting water from here to Taipo to the Plover Cove Reservoir, because water resources is very rich here in Nam Chung, and this is why paddy cultivation is so prosperous back in the past 200 years, right? Yeah, so because of this kind of water drainage, also the people, well, there's not enough water resources to sustain paddy growing in Nam Chung. Of course, at that time, because of more people, villages were migrating outward, they didn't care too much about the drainage of water resources, because they already wanted to go out, right? Yeah, so that's the another reasons I think connected to urbanization. So urbanization, the damage of urbanization to rural or cultivated land is not only changing of or swallowing farmland and make it into industrial land, but also draining away water and human resources. Yeah. And so when I would just show you some of the photos of the recent development in Nam Chung. So the story went on until 1980s. I think, I have to this kind of the fishing point, so show you a few of the fishing points from this, when you look at from this level. Yeah, and this was back when the first organic farmer came here to grow vegetables. He also grows some lotus flowers and then harvest lotus seeds here. So it's also used. Yeah, oh, okay. So I would just want to talk about the changes in Namcheong back in the 60s. So besides the drainage of people and the water, so the change of land use actually did not go to vegetable gardening, but go to fishing points. So because the villagers, some of the villagers actually rented the land to people from outside to dig out into fishing ponds. So you can see that there are many here, and in Namcheong that are actually abandoned village ponds. So this also raised another interesting questions back into the 80s when Chow said that back in the 80s, and when Hong Kong people went back to mainland China to open vegetable gardening, and then have them exported back to Hong Kong, and then let local farmers, could not survive, right? Yeah, and so actually it's the same case as the fishing part. Yeah, I haven't really looked into the information whether at that time there were Hong Kong people who went back to mainland China to open fish farming, to do fish farming, because it was actually so you can see the digging of the pond started in the 60s also. So they started to run the fishing ponds, I think up to the 80s and the 90s. I think many of them were abandoned. They could not really survive when it was just up to 90s and then or 2000. Yeah, and so I wonder at that time, when I tried to understand why, and then we heard that it's also because of the they could not compete with the fishes from mainland China because of the price difference. Yeah, so they could not survive by doing fishing, running the fishing pond here, so they just abandoned it. So I don't know whether it was also some kind of similar similar things happen. Hong Kong people went back to mainland China to operate fishing points, and then them exported back to Hong Kong, and then make local producers being so obsolete. Yeah. So I don't know if Chow can have some information that I would like to hear about that. So you can see the and so vegetable gardening actually started in, I think, in the 2005, something like that, when I think everybody knows TV in Hong Kong, the first organic farmer who came to Namcheong to start to rent the ponds, and then all this land along the ponds. Actually, they are we call it what, dikes. Actually, the dikes, yeah, the dikes. They dug all this mud or the soil dug from the pond will actually used to make the dam, not the dam, the dike. So I don't know how to the English word for it. Yeah. So vegetable farming actually started to grow in along this, and also in some other original paddy, more flat land. So you can see So you can see there, this is the farm that I worked in. Some of us are working on this land, yeah, doing vegetable farming. Yeah, this is another view. So we're doing something. This is me. And then there's another place in Namcheong that where peas actually produce. This is our production, more on for production purpose. That means that we sell those veggies to support our operation of the organization. So there are actually a larger piece of land, and originally they're all paddy fields. Yeah, and then now it's turned into vegetable farming. So these are the okay. Actually, some friends here, some farmers here or farming practitioners try to grow rice, revive the growing of rice here in Namcheong. Yeah, this is actually a few years ago when we this is the pond, and then we tried to grow vegetable paddy rice here, and then but because of the boars problems, and many boars in Namcheong, and then we didn't have any fence to prevent them from coming in to disturb the whole process. So later, after 3 years, we just gave up doing that. Yeah, so this was one of the harvest time. We were so we were doing the harvest with some young interns. So that was me at that time, was helping in the harvesting. But actually, there is one farmer here at Giting. She is doing rice growing in Namcheong still. Yeah, now. Okay. I should speak. I mean, I don't have much time left, right? Oh, so the second point I would like to respond to is the threat of urbanization. Yeah, and Namcheong, it seems that we are still, because we are at the border and around the border, and then it is quite far away from so-called, for example, the Northeastern Development projects in Hong Kong. But actually, for the time being, it seems that there's no problem. But I think there are crises actually. Is quite near. I mean, it's getting more obvious. There are crises around, also connected to urbanization. And I have two photos here. The first one is because we are quite near the border, right? And then now there is this is called the Lin Tong Hao. This is one port connecting Hong Kong and mainland China, which was newly opened, I think, 2 years ago, right? Yeah, and there are actually already some buildings and real estate projects started to grow around here. I think the more worrying development is about the so-called the Northern Cosmopolitan Development Area, co-started by Hong Kong government and the mainland government. So they were started to build a big mega cosmopolitan area in the northern part of Hong Kong, which is connected to Shenzhen. And then you see from Yunnan all up to Fanling, Shangshui, and then northern part of the new territories. So you see that Namcheong is around here. So we are not in. It seems that we are not in all these colored portions of land yet, but we can feel that there are many real estate people are already searching land in our nearby area or coming to Namcheong to look and or to try to accumulate land in there. So I think they are really looking forward to this mega project to be developed, and then so they will be benefit by the rise of the land cost. yeah, in the future. So I said these cross-border mega projects, I think will definitely have much influence or will eat up some of these cultivation land in the new territories. Okay. The third point I would like to respond to Zhao's discussion is about the work of Sangwoodgoon and the Kids Club. And he said that there's a shift from production to education. Yeah, and for me, actually, this is, I read it as both a vision and as a need. Yeah, because Nam Chung is also experienced this kind of, not really dilemma, but we have some kind of struggle, I mean, among team members, whether we should develop ourselves into a production farm or make it more educational ground for ecological education or food education and so on and so forth. Yeah. But I think we see both actually are not in competition with each other. So it's not we do one thing and not the other, but they are actually interconnected. So I will explain that later on. So this photo is demonstrating we are growing actually some roselle farm here, and then there are some kind of activities going on, and then this is a means to also, it's a kind of also educational, there's an educational arm on this kind for this kind of roselle growing project. And also this photo actually is, we can see TV here. Yeah, and then we have an educational program and held, I think 2 years ago, when we have farming sessions, and then TV was our instructor, and there are a lot young and old, and mostly young people came to learn farming. So it's also so educational programs here in Nam Chung has been actually conducted for continuously for a few years. I think since we founded our organization, but we've gradually put more emphasis on the educational programs because we see that there is a need for our experience can be as a kind of demonstration of alternative livelihood, eco-communities, yeah, and our concern for nature. So I think different kinds of dimensions of education can be, I think, perfectly demonstrated here. I mean, Nam Chung is a beautiful place, and then have a lot of eco-diversity, and then there are people around, and then there are villages, they're still living here. So there are a lot of elements that can demonstrate that in Hong Kong that we can have, we can live another ways of life other than the rapid urbanization model. Yeah. Okay, so for the reflections, first of all, I will see that this is more related to the first about Hong Kong and yeah, with China. I mean the relationship. Yeah, I think the development will be more and more merging into the rapid urbanization projects in China, and so I think small farmers or small farms, local vegetable gardening practitioners like Sangwoodgoon or Nam Chung, and many, there's still a few hundreds in Hong Kong, right? I think need to form a stronger network in order to be more resilient to different kinds of political, social, and economic changes ahead. So I think including this slogan, farmland for farm use, long day, long yong. I think this is very popular. This was very popular a few years ago, I think, or 10 years ago in Taiwan. And we when there were a lot of struggle for against land grabbing in Taiwan, and I think it happened everywhere. So we have this poster here, so that actually is from Taiwan. So I think it is a trend that we cannot avoid. So I think of more networking, and actually there are people, young people who are doing this already. And this is a group in Shaanxi. They actually call it the Northeastern Vegetables Network. Yeah, and there's concerned people who try to collect vegetables from the small farmers and then have them sold to the concerned consumers. Yeah, so this is one way also to improve the CSA method, I think mentioned by Joe. The second, I'm a bit optimistic about our future in a sense that because we face a lot of crises. So particularly food crisis are more and more obvious under the threat of the worsening of the global warming. So the heat we feel now, yeah, and all over Europe and other places, the very long-lasting pandemic, the coronavirus, yeah, and wars and conflicts. So now we see that this many Ukraine wars, right? So Hong Kong consumers should be more aware of the importance of local food production. I think the very typical example that we experienced was about the a few months ago when the imported veggies from mainland China could not get across the border, and resulting in the very high rise of demand of local vegetables. And so that's made me feel that actually more and more people were aware of that if there is no local production. So if Hong Kong is very fragile, we cannot really survive if there is no import from other places, or some transportation channel was blocked. So I think it is important to keep up the work of CSA and raising the awareness of consumers, supporting local production. The third about education, yeah, and this Ajao's Kids Club, I think it's very good because they are facing the younger schools children, and then I think their sensitivity or their adaptation to the natural environment, I think is also very important, yeah, for them to grow up in a more healthy way. Yeah, in Nam Chung, we take food education is also very seriously. I mean, take it as an effective way to respond to environmental crisis, food crisis, and the sense of powerlessness. So environmental crisis, I think it is quite obvious, right? Yeah, and because of this climate changes and then extreme weathers, it is actually getting more difficult to grow, even to grow vegetables. So like this year, we have different things that do not grow properly, yeah, because of the abnormal weathers, yeah. And also, of course, the food crisis is also obvious because of this, our dependence on the imported goods. And the sense of powerlessness is, what I mean is that actually there are so many things that we cannot control. Yeah, but I think food is so important that we need to consume every day. And then we have the sort of like power to do something. It's easier for us to do something in our everyday life. So I think if we want to do something, then we can feel that there is something that can be done. Not being a farmer, not everybody should be a farmer, but you can still grow something in a pot, in the garden, in the roof, and then, yeah, so and make things on your own hand and things like that. So I think what I mean is that you feel more powerful or more hopeful for the future. The fourth reflection is that just now I talk about production and education. I see it as a walking on two legs, yeah, because I think without production, that demonstrates the possibility of sustaining producers' livelihood, yeah, and the self-reliance of communities. Education will not be effective. That means education cannot be conveyed. I mean, the effect cannot be very good just by words. They need to see doing farming. Yeah, there are possibilities to sustain a community. Yeah, in certain sense, of course, not totally. For example, the self-sufficient rate of vegetables. We actually in Nam Chong, our rate is much higher than the 2%. Yeah, one time we have 100% of our community lunch vegetables are locally grown in Nam Chong, so that makes us very happy and excited. Yeah, and so and on the other hand, without nurturing, I mean, education, the importance of education is that we need to nurture new and local young farmers through hand-on education. So that's why actually we have a young farming intern project. We had that actually since I think 6 to 7 years ago. We started it in 2014-15. Yeah, and in this picture you see that most of them actually, some of them are farmers working here, but some are interns, yeah, and and those farmers working here actually are ex-interns, yeah. So we can see that we need more space and farming practices for young people to come and then experience it. Otherwise, production then cannot be sustained. Even if we have land, but we don't have people, then we cannot really make the self-sufficient rates increase. So I think that's it. That's what I want to talk. Sorry for taking such a long time. Thank you.
Thanks for Shun Hing. Now we have listened the child's case of market gardening at Sangwoodgoon and experiential learning at Kids Club, and then the paddy farming to vegetable gardening at Nam Chong, and then ANDO's case study in Japan. Now I would like to introduce Lingnan gardening projects in Lingnan University, because there was a campus farming in Lingnan University. Lingnan, I would like to this opportunity to introduce this project. Lingnan Gardeners team leader, Professor Lau Kin-chi, has taught courses on literature, culture, gender, education, global citizenship, and sustainability for cultural studies program. Since its inauguration in 1999, summer internship for dozens of students that has been arranged since 2005 for students to work in a farm near Beijing. In September 2014, the Lingnan Gardeners was launched. From then on, students have learned farming on campus, thus being engaged in tilling soil, growing plants, processing food, outing, and related activities. Lingnan Gardeners require students to learn about soil, seeds, and different cycles of growth, harvest and process the food, and also learn carpentry so as to make the plant beds, stools, tools, and trolleys for farming. They are also taken to visit organic farms in Hong Kong, such as Sangwoodgoon and farm at Shangshui. Work a full day as a farmer does, and experience the toughness of sweating in the sun or wading in the mud. It is hoped that the students can see that sustainable economy is an issue that the world should consider, but they can tackle the issue in their own locality. Through the activities, students learn multifaceted tasks of working in urban farming, especially in working with soil, which helps change their perception that soil is dirty. See the way soil is nourished by healthy bacteria, and observe the full cycle of growth of a plant from seed to maturity. The experiential learning experience is related to the contents on ecological education, ecological justice, climate change, energy crisis, sustainability, and human survival. Students have positive feedback on this experiential learning, having a better understanding of the importance of food and the threats from climate change, the possible actions to improve on issues of food sovereignty and safety. I will now read a student's comments. I begin to understand the relationship between farming and cultural studies. Farming is an approach for us to think not only more about human relationship, but also the relationship between human and the land. I believe I gained a lot from this course. I mean, campus farming, not only the theoretical knowledge, but also a new understanding about the importance of the relationships among the community, the land, and agriculture. Now, I would like to show a video of the campus farming. George, would you please to show the video?
浇下去，让它供水冲的比较长一点。
高了。
Thank you. And then I would like to have to invite Chow to respond. Chow?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, thank you. Please respond to the two discussants' questions.
Okay. Actually, I want to say that those cooking class look so yummy. I think I have marked down the questions or comments raised by the two discussants, and I'll try my best to respond to them one by one. I hope I won't take too long time. So the first of all, the three questions from ANDO, Professor ANDO. The first question is the reality of the support by the UK government, by the colonial government. I think your intuition is pretty accurate. They are not effective, and instead of saying support to the local market gardener, the British government, I think they were pretty strategic at that time. They didn't really do anything to encourage market gardening. They all they did was to set up institutions. on the one hand, they set up one central wholesale market, and then on the other hand, they pass some laws to lay down the procedure and also the structure for the market gardener in different locality to start their own cooperative group. So in other words, the government didn't, at that time, they didn't support, so to speak, in terms of giving money or giving other resources. They instead, what they did was to monopolize the whole production. They didn't monopolize the production. They monopolized the transportation and also the marketing part of the whole supply chain. By doing that, they basically criminalize any other people who try to transport or try to wholesale vegetable outside of the marketing, the government institution. So they didn't, to sum up, they didn't really did anything to sort of support the market gardener in the new territory, but they penalized people who didn't follow the rule, the new rule set up by the British colonial government. And in terms of the effect, you are also correct that it was not good, and it was indeed quite poor, the result. Even though the government attempted, they did set up a central wholesale market in the urban area for the circulation and the buys and wholesales of vegetables from the new territory. But the farmers and some individual private wholesaler, they actually kept operating, they kept exchanging illegally. And I think starting from 1950 to up until now, we have some wholesale market called the dawn market. So literally, they operate at dawn time, before 6 o'clock in the morning. They were basically places where the vegetable gardener, they carry their fresh produce to wholesale in those dawn market, and the buyers come from everywhere in Hong Kong, from the urban area, from Hong Kong Island, and from the Kowloon area. They go to the dawn market and then wholesale and then transport those vegetables back to the city. And then this kind of practice kept going on for, I don't know, 60 years, 70 years since the very beginning. So on the one hand, the government didn't really give material support to the market gardener, and then the market gardener and also people from other moments of the supply chain, they didn't really comply to the government policy 100%. Yeah. So this is the response to your my response to the first question. And then the second question, again, against the grain, about the title of my presentation. Yeah, of course, I borrowed the name and some related ideas from James Scott, and then I was and I agree that that he come up with this title against the grain from his should I say anarchist position, trying to give a critical account for the relationship between grain production and also the grain distribution. On the one hand, grain production and distribution, and then the other hand is the government capacity and also the government's dominance over the farmers. He sought to figure out the relationship between these two in order to give an alternative account for the, again, ordinary account for development of human civilization, which is human being began to master crop production, and then they gather wealth and then resources, and then we have something called the state. And he was pretty much against this popular account. And I didn't really, it is not really the case in Hong Kong for sure. And I borrowed this title because there is one common understanding of Hong Kong, about Hong Kong, as I have mentioned in my presentation, that vegetables, the establishment of the market gardening sector was at the expense of the paddy cultivation, and I think to that to the people who agree to that account, it would be the same as saying the establishment of market gardening was basically developed against the paddy cultivation. But I actually would like to add a question mark to this this version of against the grain. I actually take the meaning of against the grain as it is more ordinary meaning, which is people in Hong Kong, they start growing vegetable, they start a market garden. It is they do this, how should I say, the people who do this, they were actually against the natural inclination of the style of urban development. This is what I use the title against the grain. This is what I am referred to when I use this title, because against the grain, another meaning of this phrase is that against natural inclination. People in Hong Kong, when they start a market garden, they were actually playing a very dangerous game with the urban development, urbanization and industrialization. That is that is the meaning why I use this phrase. Of course, it is obviously the title of James Scott's book, but what I'm thinking about this name is more about is original or ordinary meaning, which is against natural inclination. And this is one aspect or one layer of my title. And another layer of the title, I think it answer more to your question about the title. Did market gardening liberate the farmers from did market gardening liberate the farmers? I think this is a good question. Historically, on the one hand, why the government tried to encourage more people to take up farmland in the new territory to grow vegetable? Some historical analysis would suggest that it was also a tool for the British colonial governments to shake or break down, if not break down, is at least it shake the foundation of power of the indigenous organization, which relies in the past heavily on paddy production. So and on the other hand, some people would also suggest that those government institutions and also the law which regulate the organization of cooperative, vegetable cooperative, was a way for the government to exercise their control or dominance over the vegetables, because vegetable gardeners, because otherwise the government actually has no apparatus or other tools to govern the practices of the market gardeners. So I would say that in Hong Kong, no matter for the market gardeners or the indigenous paddy cultivator, the paddy farmer, what the government did in the past, colonial government did in the past, is trying to exert or to impose certain form of regulatory framework or certain form of governance over the farmers, because otherwise if farmers only grow something and then sell it in private market or dawn market, the government has no regulation, no tools to regulate them whatsoever. In Hong Kong, it doesn't need a license to grow vegetable. It doesn't need a license to grow paddy rice, and then it doesn't need a license to sell vegetables, and it doesn't need a license to wholesale vegetable. No such kind of regulation existed at that time. So, so if the government the colonial government wanted to exercise some form of dominance or governance over the people who practice paddy cultivation or vegetable gardening, I think the most effective way for them is to control the marketing part, the circulation part. Therefore, I would say even into the era of vegetable marketing, what the government did, although to a certain extent it fails, but what the government attempted to do was to exercise control over the farmer rather than liberate the farmers. But this is I think my I think I would respond to your second question this way. So, and the third question about the customers, I think it relates to Hing's optimism, because I'm optimistic too. Pretty blind optimism. I think cultivating CSA customers or community, to me is to like, I think the key words is sensitivity. What does it mean? I mean, because actually our forms of relationship with the CSA community is pretty much similar to what you mentioned as partnership in the Japanese context. We offer seasonal vegetables. The customer didn't. Customers do not choose their favorite, and so on and so forth. And we prefer to do this because it gives us it gives us the enough time to cultivate something. What are these something? At least say for example, the CSA group in Lingnan University. They were our first CSA community. I think more than 10 years, right? And if someone keep eating the vegetables from a certain farms for a few years, up to 10 years, they experience what the farm experience, what the farm can produce, what the farm cannot produce, what the farm produce at certain time, what the farm cannot produce at certain time. It is beyond discussion or rational discussion. I can't rationally convince someone about the rhythm of our farm, but through this prolonged long-term relationship, I think the customer will understand from their first-hand experience of eating those vegetables, what is the rhythm of a farm in Hong Kong. And then I think to a certain extent, this kind of practice, I don't know if I describe it very accurately, or I can describe what I'm thinking in my mind accurately. It infuse or it insert some other factors or other affective elements into their so-called taste or preferences. Because I always think that taste and preferences are always considered as very subjective things, right? Again, I have already mentioned in the presentation, taste and preferences are always considered as very subjective. And it has to do with his upbringing, his or her upbringing, family background. It is beyond discussion. You can't change the taste of a person simply by discussing with him. But then it doesn't mean that it was not conditioned by something. And the type of relationship with our customer, the CSA relationship, I think it gives another kind of conditioning to the customers. They may not enjoy 100% what we are able to offer them because of so many reasons. But then, but in the end, what they are eating was the result of a combination of a lot of factors, and they understand it, or they are trying to accommodate all these factors into their taste. And I think this is a very interesting process if we are able to keep such kind of relationship with a fixed group of people over a long period of time. And so I think the Lingnan group is one example. And then our other CSA group also, I think also to different extent exhibit this type of characteristics. And I hope that especially because we are putting more focus on children or younger children at younger age. What we are imagining or what we are dreaming of is it's not to convert them back to what we think of healthier or more organic from an already polluted taste. We don't want them to first get polluted and then converting them back. But we take the first step, or we we preoccupy them with something better before they grow up and then face the larger society. We don't know what would be the result, but because this is also what we trying to do with, like, say for example, our own daughter. She would go to Disney at a certain point. She would go to eat fast food like McDonald's, KFC at a certain point, but at least she has already tasted vegetables from our own farm before she go out to eat junk food. And then I think this sequence, we are thinking if this sequence really matters. So yeah, for Hing's questions and comments. Yeah, I think your presentation of the Namchong case actually raised a lot of interesting issues. Yeah, why the British government didn't care about the decrease of paddy production, and why instead they care so much about the vegetable production. I think this is an interesting question. I have came across some literature about the situation immediately after the Second World War. I didn't really remember very clearly, but because at that point the UK was still a superpower. It has influence over the Asia-Pacific region, including lots of major rice production countries like Thailand, like Vietnam, like
India,
Cambodia, etc., etc. Like Australia, say for example. I think they were confident about the circulation and also the supply of paddy rice from their allies. So it actually they actually has a lot of agreements between those rice production country to guarantee not only Hong Kong, basically the so-called the free world, the supply of paddy rice in the free world. So I think that could be one background to why they didn't worry so much about the paddy production. But if the object was vegetables, because I think the most important characteristic of vegetable production at that time was that it doesn't endure prolonged transportation. So the mainland China has had tremendous advantage over other area in terms of importing vegetables to Hong Kong. So it could be one reason why rye was not so worrying, but vegetable was more critical. And about the fish pond, yeah, I think fish pond is another a fish pond. I think open up and some other trajectory of the story of Hong Kong farmland. In my interviews of some farmers working on, say for example, water spinach or watercress, and of course their common characteristics was hydroponic in a traditional way. They were grown in water. Many of the some of the farmers, say for example in Longyuan or in Hoshanghang, or some of those they working in northeastern part, Dagulang, etc. They are watercress farmland. Before they started growing watercress in that farmland, some of them actually they raise I don't know the English but in literal translation of that Chinese is red bug, red worm, 红虫啊, which is the food for goldfish. Some people would raise goldfish at their home for decoration or for their hobbies, and then those red worm are the food for the goldfish. And then in the past, between the paddy rice and the watercress, those fields were converted to like a production plant for this red worm. I think there are another condition to this production of red worm is that in the before 80s, there are still lots of large and small chicken farm in Hong Kong. And then the chicken shit, the chicken chicken the chicken shit was used to feed the red worm. And then if when there were still chicken farm in Hong Kong, the red worm farm, they got cheap supply of feed. So I think this kind of condition enable a short period of time when this red worm farm could occupy the field originally used to grow paddy rice. But again, what they mentioned is that the red worm from mainland China was also very cheap and in large quantities, and then they were also driven out of business. So vegetables, fish, and red worm, all these types of agricultural product, I think they more or less suffer the same structure with the relationship to China. But yeah, I didn't know too much about that. But as you mentioned this question, I just recall some of the data that some of the interviewees had mentioned. Yeah, for the北部都會區, the Northern Cosmopolitan Project. Yeah, I didn't really know how to respond to this type of super mega project. But I totally agree with you that production and education should go hand in hand. Yeah, I think it actually it could be another panel discussion. But yeah, our own experience is that we almost put 100% concentration on the production in maybe up to 2 years ago. But on the one hand, the economy of being a productive farmer in Hong Kong is actually pretty severe. It doesn't mean that you can't earn a living, but you really have to work super hard. And on the other hand, I think, as I said, everyone is trying to preoccupy our children. Why don't we work harder to compete with them on that level? Especially because our own experience is that we consider ourselves as parents or young parents. I think there are also young parents out there care about these issues, and on a very microscopic or personal level, I think it would also be a good idea that these types of parents, they could know each other and know that at least they are not alone, because normally this type of parents, they got challenged from friends, relatives, parents, and the general social atmosphere. And then it is our experience that when parents get together, even though they didn't know before they came to Kids Cup, when they were in Kids Cup, they suddenly feel, how to say, they feel safe to speak what they think parenting should be or could be. I think, at least in this sense, in a lot of sense, for children and for parents, and then we accidentally found that it could be a point of intervention. Yeah, and I think more and a lot more could be imagined and could be done. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, I think my response. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And then I would like to give two of the discussants each have only 1 minute sharply, because our time is overrun. Sorry that. Okay, ANDO, your turn. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. And so the first question that you talked about the criminalizing, the Hong Kong government criminalize the farmers who look for their own market. This is very similar in the Japanese organic farmers case, but it's not the top down from the government, but the peer pressure in the community. So the people who look for organic farming, they are criminalized in the community. So that was quite interesting. And also, being a productive farmer, very difficult issue is a very interesting. Being a productive farmer in Hong Kong, you said that it was very difficult, but I think it's a very common everywhere in the world. So Japanese farmers are also say the same thing, because farming is always very lot of the risks, vulnerable to the climate and vulnerable to the market. So education is always necessary for farmer to survive in the this market and in the world. So that's what I want to say. Okay. I'd like to talk more, but stop it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Zhou's response. I would like to respond just to the saying about the colonial rule of uprooting the rice growing as a means to uproot the whole traditional power in the new territories. Yeah, I tend to agree with such kind of saying, because I don't know whether it's the intention of the colonial government, but I think in fact it is the result of such a kind of strategy. I mean, and well, just ignoring paddy, and as you mentioned that they have already, they care more actually about their source of rice for England. Yeah, of course they have already secured from other countries, but I think for Hong Kong, I think that's not their concern. But I think because agriculture and then the village and then the farmers, I mean the villagers, actually the three long, actually are intercorrect related to one another. So if you drop one thing and then you will, I think, uproot another one, and then I think the people also uprooted at that time. So I think the whole Longchun, the village or the rural area, I think is it's not as powerful as before. That's what my observation was. So thank you for an interesting discussion.
I think there is one question from mainland China. We are simultaneous that there are 389 audience in mainland China, the answer. The question is, hi, Dr. Chow, what is the situation of young people's participation in agriculture in Hong Kong compared to the rural reconstruction on the mainland? As a young man returning to his hometown, what advice do you have for youngsters to engage in agriculture? Your turn, please, Dr. Chow.
My advice comes from the learning of permaculture, which is our basis of our thinking about agriculture, of planting, or even how to organize our life. My advice is to, I think it is very, how to say, your homeland will thank you very much for intending to or trying to go back and contribute to your homeland or hometown, home village. And my advice is to try to stay there and do some hard observation. Try to see what your village has and what your village lack, and then see if you can come up with some new idea or bring in some new resources, but not at the expense of what you already has or what has always been functional. I think that is very important, and then I think this is what can be done by young people. Young people are more connected with the new world, and then if you come from a certain town, you have advantage over most of other people about knowing your hometown, and then to see what your hometown is or already has, and then try to think of how to add on or improve instead of like changing or throwing in some ideas from far away. I think that would be healthy and appropriate, and yeah, I think that would be welcomed by your fellow people.
The problems facing Hong Kong's vegetable gardens and agriculture are unique to the city itself, but they are also common to the region and the world in the process of industrialization and urbanization. In the epidemic era of climate change, increasingly unpredictable international situation, and local governance in chaos, agriculture and urban food self-sufficiency are no longer just topics for after-dinner conversation, but questions that every place has to answer. The dilemma faced by Shanghai in recent months, where the food self-sufficiency rate is relatively low, is a case in point, and Shanghai's self-sufficient rate is still higher than Hong Kong's. In this sense, the Light of Dusk deals with issues that are both local and international, long beyond the identity politics of national identity. Think of the farmers in Hong Kong and around the world, working with plants and growing fresh food for us. A small but incomparable practice that is precisely the strength needed in this age of uncertainty. Thanks for all the audience, thanks the petitioner, and thanks all the panelists and